Hi everybody. Can you just shout if you can't hear us or see the presentation? So I am here with Matt Smith, who's a CFPR resident artist who started with us in January, and he is going to be talking about his practice and explorations with printmaking since he's been here. And I need to let you know that the Zoom call is recorded, and you can catch up with it later. And I think we are ready to go. And if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat box and we'll look at them after. Thank you.
Hi, hello everybody. Thanks for your time this afternoon. As Lizzie's just said, I'm Matt Smith, one of the artists in residence at the Centre for Print Research, and I just thought I'd give you a quick overview, very quick overview about my practice, and then talk a bit about what I've been working on at CFPR and try and explore why I think I might be doing what I'm doing here, which is very much still in process at the moment. Sorry, I'm trying. Lizzie's next to me. So starting off, when I came into CFPR, I was very interested in scanning and printing, 3D printing figurines. And when I was coming to do this talk, I realized figurines have been a really small part of my practice, but they've come up in different projects over the years as kind of slight add-ons to projects. So I just thought I'd go through a couple of those to try and draw some threads together. So this was Queering the Museum in Birmingham in 2010, which was very much a focus at looking at why museums were very bad at talking about LGBT lives. In fact, there was almost complete erasure in UK museums at the time. And as a ceramicist, figurines are one of the few times when identity politics can be seen in ceramics. So it made sense to work a bit with the ceramics in the museum. And here, the figure on the left is a new figurine by me that was placed in a case with an existing figurine of I guess a farm boy. And by putting these two figures together, to my eyes, it looks like the guy on the right is trying to pick up the guy on the left. And it moves him out of a bucolic landscape into a bit more of a gay cruising scene. I'm just waiting for this to go down. No, can we do
yeah.
Might be stopping there.
Try again.
Sorry, guys. There we go. This is another case from Queering the Museum, and again, in between two, I guess, Derby figure groups, a same-sex figure group is placed in the middle. You can see from the sideburns of the man in a dress in the central piece that was newly added to the case. And the final image from that project was this one, the ladies of Llangollen in LGBT history, a very famous same-sex female partnership who lived in North Wales. They left Ireland and set up home together in North Wales and became celebrities of the 1770s. And here this new figurine group is placed within ceramics from the 1770s in the museum, just marking in LGBT history, people either didn't exist or they were criminalized or they were medicalized. So there are very few examples of kind of, what would you say, emotionally stable, healthy relationships, because society didn't allow them in the past. So Eleanor Butler and Sarah Ponsonby have a very particular place in LGBT history. So moving on, I was artist in residence at the V&A in 2015, and as part of the residency, they give you this case that you can either show your own work in or work with museum collections in. And I was really interested, I don't know why, but I was really interested in why figurines, ceramic figurines, depict behavior that we'd usually associate, sorry, one second, that we'd usually, I've gone from one screen to another, we'd usually associate with gay men from the 1970s. And I don't really understand why or what this might tell us, but what I thought it might do is provide some fun in terms of working with the collections to see what could come out of this. So I selected figurines from the museum's collections and lined them up on a binary from the most butch to the most camp, and then divided it by country. Here you can see France, Britain, and Germany. And these are obviously historical figurines, and we don't really understand how gender performance was understood in the past. It was a different country. So I thought I'd correlate it with a contemporary idea of camp, the Eurovision Song Contest. So by looking at how camp figures were from various countries and how well those countries had done in the Eurovision Song Contest over the last 40 years, you could find this absolutely perfectly unscientific correlation between the two. So obviously, ceramic figurines are a real precursor for who was going to do well in the Eurovision Song Contest. I think we're all better for knowing that. And then the final project to talk about was Parian Unpacked at the Fitzwilliam. And here, Parian pieces in black that I'd made were interspersed within the museum's collections of figurines, and just creating dialogues about, it was very much at the time when Brexit was being debated, and exploring ideas of what happened when new bodies came into existing environments and feelings that were being raised in the press about this movement. And also just playing with what was already in the cases, these white figures, and trying to just highlight how ridiculous these figurines are. And then just before I go on to, oh, sorry. And here are just some images of my regular practice working with the gallery. Just to give you an idea as to how figurines kind of come into the work, but aren't always the whole part of it. And then the final example, sorry, from the Fitzwilliam is this, which is Other Kinds of Love, that was placed between two bronzes from the collections, one of Ganymede and the Eagle and one of the Leader and the Swan. And the piece in the middle that was made for the museum was trying to question why these historic bronzes, one of swan sex and one of eagle sex, were okay, but any depiction of same sex within the museum was seen as something really difficult or controversial. And just trying to explore why there'd been this blockage within museum curating. So that was then, and this is now. And this is just a run through of what I've been working on while at the Centre for Print Research, trying to summarize it into some sort of logical order. I've been scanning, digitally manipulating, and 3D printing objects, doing some laser cutting, just made some plates, and there's going to be some print editions. So I kind of came in to CFPR thinking I would scan small figurines and then enlarge them massively and print them out at a huge scale. That didn't really work. So there was a lot of pivoting, and that's kind of okay, and actually a real joy to have time just looking at process and not with a necessary sure idea of what the end result would be. So it turns out that scanning figurines is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. You can get a really bad scan quite quickly, but to get a really good scan, you need somebody a lot more skilled than I am, with machinery that's a lot more difficult than I'm able to deal with. So I was lucky that Xavi was able to help with this, and we got some really great scans out. But then when it goes into the world of the digital, could be manipulated in a way that mirrors what I've been doing in play, but actually works in quite a different way as well. So suddenly the tools started shaping how the work looked. So this is a line mesh within Blender, and this is what it looks like, hopefully, when it's rendered as a solid. So this one we printed out in PLA, so a plastic material. And here on the left, you can see it in its initial printout, and on the right, after the supports have been cut off. So in my naivety, I thought 3D printing, you just press Control P and it came out perfectly. But it turns out, like all materials, while it's being printed, it needs supporting to stop it dropping. And so you end up with a lot of, quite a lot of labor time, a lot of hand time with the objects once they've been printed. Who knew? We know. And this led on to this piece, which is a 1970s Dalton figurine that was scanned and then stretched digitally and then printed out. And I don't know what this is doing yet. And I'm kind of sitting with these works just to see what they might be talking about. And that feels okay at the moment. One day I'll know, but at the moment I'm just sitting with uncertainty on these. But there's something, to my eyes, something interesting going on here, and it's speaking in a visual language that neither refers to the figurine nor completely to kind of digital technology, but sits somewhere in between, that I'm quite interested and excited about. One of the things with 3D printing that I was very good with was failing. So I thought I'd put some of the failures up here. Orange, great color, horrible filament to work with. And the Olivia Newton-John shiny black latex look, quite attractive. But again, wasn't so happy printing when it came to heads and necks. So it's been a massive learning curve, and that's been great. At times frustrating, but great. And during, while waiting for the 3D prints to happen, I was next to the printer, and it seemed rude not to use it. So started creating these laser cut figures from museum. These are all taken from photographs of museum objects that are available online. And I was interested in what happens with this information about 3D objects that we can only access in 2D because they're photographs online, and how they can operate in a space that's somewhere between 2D and 3D and also scaled up. But one of the real joys I found of working with the software and the 3D print was what happened before you got to printing it. And the images, I think, are just stunning. What the software produces very quickly and instinctively is something that I don't think could be produced any other way. And I'd really like to start working with these in terms of maybe material repeat prints or wallpaper prints. And again, these are images that are just taken from, they're kind of byproducts, they're waste products almost of the process. But these I'm currently printing as decals onto ceramic plates. There's a nice perversity about images of figurines becoming flat and going onto plates, which are almost flat, but not quite. And in terms of editioning, while I'm here, it was this work more than the 3D prints that I thought was kind of most ripe for exploration and use. So I'm going to be working with Laura to try and create a set of 4 or 5 prints. So the images in orange and yellow, the colors are very much from the software. They're the colors that the software produces rather than any active decision on my part. And then the backgrounds for me, I'm a big fan of Lynn Chadwick and his prints from the 1970s. And he would use these teal colors and these angular landscapes. So there's kind of a bit of homage to Lynn Chadwick there, but very much with using what 3D print and design does. And this hopefully is the second set of prints. So kind of, I've rattled through that, I'm really sorry. But in a nutshell, what I came to do at CFPR was incredibly naive and ridiculously naive and overambitious. And what I've ended up doing is not where I saw it going, but I think it's a really interesting place to go. Well, while I've been here, I also spent some time going up to Pangolin, the art foundry, who work in a similar way, but are very much working with production. So I think some of what I've learned here, I think I might end up transferring and working potentially with them in the future if it needs to go beyond prototyping into actual production for an exhibition in the future. But I just feel I've got all this material now, which has been brilliant. And now my job is to work out how to make it make sense in terms of a public-facing exhibition.
Cool. And would that be your first exhibition that's 2D then?
Would it be? It's one of the first times, yeah. It's the second time I've worked with print, but this time is much more hands-on than the time before. And certainly the prints I've worked with before have been very much about museum collections. This is a real departure for me, working with found objects and transferring them into print feels like a real step away.
And how, just wondering how the software comes up with these kind of, is that just during the scanning that they'll take images?
So what happens once you've scanned it, the software then turns it into a mesh, which is like a grid. So it doesn't see it as an object, it sees it as lots of lines that connect together. And so what we're seeing here in gold is actually those lines that are all joined by points. So there's no solid wall, it's just lines and points that connect. But because there are so many in places, to our eyes, it looks opaque. And I think that's what gives it this glow. So yeah, I just couldn't believe how beautiful things looked in the software when there was no reason for them to look attractive. So yeah, it felt like a real gift. So thanks, software designers.
Yeah.
They're great.
They exist. Thank you, Matt. Thanks. Does anybody have any questions for Matt? You can unmute or type in the chat.
I have some questions and I would like to do it by speaking, not by typing.
Perfect. That's lovely.
So Matt, I have several questions as usual. So let's start first with the figurines. I'm never sure where they are sitting, because whether there are pieces of art or whether you by giving them a different twist, whether you push them into art or whether they are purely almost like kitsch decorative objects. Because mostly the people who collect figurines I don't like. So it's more
Actually, I've got to say 10 out of 10 for that question. Thank you. And you've reminded me of loads of things I should have said during the talk, and apologies for that. My starting point for figurines was my best friend growing up lived in a council house, and her mum had these collection of figurines that were quite cheap and mass produced. And I just remember thinking, why in this environment are there these depictions of upper class 18th century men performing in a very camp manneristic? Like, what is that? And I still don't know what to do with that. And I think figurines, for me, the joy of them is that they're difficult. So the really beautiful old ones are stunning, and the skill is incredible, and they've got real value, both aesthetically and economic. But most figurines are fairly awful. And then they're kind of like, well, for me, where is the boundary between a figurine and sculpture, or a figurine and kitsch? And I think they slip between these areas. And as a ceramicist, kind of the high value stuff is studio pottery, where it's all about the individual. It's not about the mass production or the industrial production. But then the skill involved in producing figurines well is huge. So I feel they've slipped into this space where they're unloved. And certainly culturally, I think they're given very little value. And some of them deserve very little value, but other ones don't. But what I'm really interested in is, in terms of ceramics, it's the only place where we see depictions of identity. And so if you're interested in museums or museums and how they work and who they reflect, which I am deeply, as a ceramicist, it's one of the few places you can go where ideas of race, gender, class, start to be seen within the objects, where they don't have to be overlaid upon by museums. So I think they're really valuable culturally, but I think in terms of taste, they occupy a really difficult place. So I agree with you, Suzanne. Not many of my friends would have large figurine collections, but I think maybe we need to change that. I'll get you loving them by the end of today, Suzanne, I promise.
You know, I've got some, because it must have been 2 years ago. I went to the eastern part of Germany, where there is a whole cluster of porcelain china manufacturers. And I went to a tour, and then I realized how much skill is involved. For example, they use real lace to make the lacy, you know, sleeves of the figurines. You know, you look at the figurine and you think, this is awful, but the skill is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. I couldn't resist then to buy some, because I thought this is a treasure.
I think this is where it gets interesting, is when you do start understanding them, they do become more and more valuable. And I think, in a way, I think figurines have suffered. It's a bit like everybody thinking Picasso's are no good because they've seen that poster of the tennis player scratching her bum. I mean, they're both 2D depictions, but they're operating very differently. But somehow we've managed to conflate really well-made figurines with really cheap mass-produced ones. And somehow, I think because they're often placed in the decorative domestic setting, and also, I don't know if gender comes into this, but they've occupied a really low cultural level, I think. And maybe they deserve to be there, I don't know. But I think there's more to them than I think we naturally expect them to hold. Does that sentence make any sense? Almost.
Yeah.
But great question, Suzanne.
May I ask another one?
Please, I'm loving this.
So with your prints now, how will you print them? And will you sort of, because, you know, I'm at the moment on this kind of journey from AI to a hand-pulled print. So will you do anything else to your prints, or will you just use digital means to get, you know, the content from the digital realm into the physical realm?
Yeah, well, actually, this is a question I was going to throw out while we've got a group of people working with print, is to get anybody's advice this afternoon. I'd really like to not just do a digital print. I'd really like there to, working with textiles and ceramics, materiality is really important to me. And so I'd like the prints to have some sense of texture or pressure, or I'd like them to feel like they're objects in their own right, rather than just carriers of a 2D image. So any suggestions from anybody this afternoon would be really welcome. And I'm about to talk to Laura tomorrow. So not being a print person, any advice would be really welcome. It would make me look as though I know what I was doing tomorrow. So please do shout.
You know, there are many possibilities. And we have the laser cutter just to put that into the mix. But yeah, I will be in tomorrow as well. I can show you some stuff you will probably like.
Fantastic. Brilliant. That would be really helpful. And if anybody's got any techniques that they think would translate well to these images, I'd be really grateful to hear from you.
Suzanne might explode at me saying this with her hatred of screen printing, but I think they would work really nicely as screen prints.
Yeah.
You'd get the block color of the backgrounds, and then you could either do a different print method on top to sort of, because there's a strange transcendence to the objects. They somehow don't quite belong in their backgrounds. They've almost like been imported from another space. So
Yeah.
it could be nice to combine two different print methods. But yeah, the solid block color would be really nice as a screen print.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's really generous of you. I appreciate it.
And you know, with James, we do a combination of the sort of laser cut relief prints and then intaglio prints. So we could do something similar with screen printing, you know, the blocky color with screen printing, and then to get more texture or deboss in a relief print.
Nice. Brilliant.
Tracy's put maybe laser engraved over a screen print.
Yes, that's a possibility.
Fantastic. Thank you. Great. Sorry, I'm just reading comments. There's one, I see the screen printing as a background. I think we're all agreed on the screen printing, which is great. No, that's great. Interesting traveling between 2D and 3D. Yeah, I find that movement between 2D and 3D, and I've worked alongside quite a few people working with fabric and fashion and that pattern cutting. I think I find there's something really interesting how things can go from the flat into the 3D and then back into the flat again. There was a lecturer, a famous glass artist, who refused to look at objects in real life with students. He wanted to see photographs because he felt that was how they'd be seen by selectors for exhibitions, which I think raises interesting and some difficult questions about 2D and 3D, but just thought I'd throw that one in there.
Like some of your imperfect 3D results.
Thanks very much.
I think that could be.
Should I glue a pin on the back and have them as brooches?
Yeah.
Nice. We can do them.
What have you got any plans for the laser cut?
Yeah, I think they might end up as part of a museum show coming up. I've coloured them. They've all been wood stained now. But yeah, I think there's, and again, I know usually I'll work on an exhibition project that'll be about 2 years long. So by the time it comes to open, I'm really anchored in what I've done and why. And at the moment, I feel still mid-process in the thinking here. I'm not quite sure how to read these objects. And I was talking to the CFPR kindly commission a writer for each of us about the work. And I was talking to Meredith Martin, who's at New York University and is an expert in 18th century art, about this yesterday. And it's been really interesting. Rococo is not my area at all. We're talking to somebody who really knows their stuff about connections and links that she's starting to pull out between the work and the period. And so I'm just really interested to see what this might open up for other people as well as myself.